wonder what you'll find with an open mind. You may be surprised. Yeah, gotta get away from this illusion for the sake of the world. This delusion has gotta go.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Atheist Experience Live. Today is Sunday, August 1st, 2010. I'm Matt Dillahunty. Joining me this week back, finally, AronRa. Welcome.
How you do?
We're always glad to have him come down. He was here in March, I believe, wasn't it? And now we're back. And he got to go to the Amazing Meeting 8, and I didn't. So we'll probably spend some time talking about that today. This is a live public access television program that takes phone calls. So we'll have the number up for you really soon, and you'll be able to call in and ask questions, both of AronRa or me, or about Tam, or whatever subject you want to talk about. We're sponsored by the Atheist Community of Austin, a nonprofit educational organization promoting positive atheism and the separation of church and state. The ACA has weekly meetings every Sunday at Romeo's on Barton Springs Road, beginning at around 11:30, except for the first Sunday of the month, which was today. We'll host our lecture series at the Austin History Center, located at the corner of 9th and Guadalupe. Today's lecture, we had Brian and Sarah from Americans United for Church-State Separation, or Americans United for Separation of Church and State. Let me make sure I get the name of the organization right. Come in and talk a little bit about church-state separation and what's going on with that. I'll have a little bit more at the end of the announcements about things that are upcoming with AU, but I was really glad that they made it down today. We had a good time. If you're in the Austin area and want to come to those lectures, they're open to the public. All of our events are open to the public. You don't have to be a member to attend as long as you're coming down to actually participate and not to preach, proselytize, or provoke, or protest, or pester, or any of the other things that we don't need at our events. You're more than welcome. After this program's over, those of us involved get together and go to dinner at Threadgill's at 301 West Riverside Drive. And this show is on until 6 o'clock. We'll be down there around 6:30 or so. That's also open to the public as well. In addition to this program, the ACA also sponsors a bi-weekly internet audio podcast, and I have to keep saying that now because it's in my contract to make people laugh, which is currently on hiatus until I get my move situation sorted out, and we're in the new place in September. But Russell and Linnea and Martin and some of his friends have put together rogue episodes that have been posted. You can go to Nonprofits Radio, that's PHETS, nonprofitsradio.com for more information about that program and to catch up on the podcast episodes that were put up there recently. In addition, there's a number of events coming up. September 25th will be the ACA's annual Bat Cruise. For more information about the ACA or the Bat Cruise, you can visit the website www.atheist-community.org. There you will find the information on the Bat Cruise, the information on our other events, and a frequently asked questions page where you can go to get answers to questions that we have frequently been asked. Or at least we're going to pretend like we've been asked frequently because they're things we think need to be addressed. If you do not get through on the telephone today or you don't want to, you can email tv@atheist-community.org. That goes to myself, the co-host, most of the people behind the scenes. Aaron isn't actually on that list, so he won't be getting those emails, but I'll do my best to forward any questions you have to him, and hopefully he'll get to them even in a more timely fashion than I do. We can't possibly promise to answer all the email that comes in. There's simply too much. We do answer quite a bit of it, though, and we do read all of it as long as you put AETV or NPR in the subject line to make sure it gets through the spam filters. It got read. It might not have got read the day you sent it, but it will definitely be read. In addition, the Texas Free Thought Convention is coming up October 8th through 10th in Dallas. You can go to texasfreethoughtconvention.com, I believe. It may be .org. I don't actually have a slide for the actual convention website. It's one of those two, and it'll give you all the information, including your registration and the speakers list and information about where to stay and what sort of events are going to be going on in the area, including a kind of introduction to Camp Quest, something we've talked about several times, and Amy Parsons was here last month for the lecture to talk a little bit about Camp Quest there. That's going to be going on in conjunction with the Free Thought Convention. It's always a good time if you're able to make it. We'll be driving up there, taking some of the equipment from the Nonprofits podcast and recording some interviews with the speakers and showing highlight clips of the show and having a good time. So if you can't make it to Austin, if you're in the Dallas area, if you can make it to the Dallas area, wanted to meet folks from the show. We'll be up there kind of doing a mock show since we can't obviously tap into public access from way up there. I mentioned Americans United spoke to us this morning. They have a number of events coming up, including Reverend Stephen Baines sometime around the end of August. I don't have details on exactly when and where that's going to happen yet. He'll be in town to talk to believers and non-believers about how to better communicate and cooperate, about how to bridge this communication gap that seems to happen, it seems to exist between believers and non-believers who both support church-state separation. There are people, church-state separation is not just an idea that's supported by atheists and freethinkers, it's supported by theists as well, and should be supported by everybody. If you understood it properly about how it protects everybody's religious freedom, there's absolutely no reason to not support it. It's only a bunch of ideologues that want to push an agenda that actually oppose church-state separation. And on October 18th, which is a Monday, the Reverend Barry Lynn, who is the current head of the Americans United for Church Separation of Church and State, will be in town. We'll get more details as that event gets closer. And we're hoping to see some of you guys out at those events, including dinner after the show. And that's all the announcements. So you can change the background graphic. If you remember, there it is. It's replaced the pause bars. Although, I think everybody should listen to and love the announcements.
All right.
Because if your group isn't doing this much stuff, you could be. It's pretty easy. How you doing?
It's all right. It's all right.
It's
A little,
all right.
little road worn. Sat in the car.
The road warrior.
3
road
hours
warrior.
down there. Yeah.
So obviously you went and did something fun last month that I didn't get to do.
Yeah. I made a hell of a trip out of it. But yeah, I got to go to TAM. I got to be a fanboy for a bit. Meeting some people that I'd been looking forward to meeting for months. I mean, James Randi wasn't in Florida when I went to do the Darwin Day thing. He was supposed to be there. Initially, when they sold me on the idea, they said that he and I were going to be sitting together as luminaries at the fundraising dinner. It didn't happen. But I did finally get to meet him up there. It was a great thing. He's a really sweet guy. The remarkable thing was that when I was going to meet him, and I see him just standing a few feet away and nobody's bothering him, oh, that's James Randi, and I can't get to him because other people were coming up to take pictures with me and shake my hand, and he was just kind of standing there stroking his beard watching this going on, so that was kind of cool.
Good times.
Yeah.
I got to go to TAM 7 last year, but I wanted to talk a little bit, we're lining up some callers, the telephone number's up, and we'll start taking callers here in just a couple minutes. But I wanted to talk a little bit about, what you thought about the amazing meeting, what you thought the highlights were, and anything that you thought they might have been able to improve on or change or anything like that.
Well, I didn't get, as we were talking about before, I didn't get a lot of education out of it. I did see a couple of things that were addressed that, one of which I thought should be, and another one I had a little bit of a objection to. One, somebody was speaking, and I got so confused because I had so many things going on. I was in and out the whole time. But somebody had mentioned about being vitriolic to believers and people of faith, and I'm completely down with that message. There's absolutely no reason to be hostile. As you are a great example of this, I think I am to a lesser degree, and many other people.
I'm a great example of being hostile?
Well, I'm getting to a point.
Okay.
The most outspoken advocates of rational thinking, of skepticism, of this sort of philosophy of believing things that are not that are based on reason as opposed to faith. The greatest proponents of this type of thinking are all ex-believers. Most of them are ex-creationists. So any of you, when you get into a debate, and people ask me all the time whether there's any purpose in debating theists, online on YouTube and Usenet or what have you, yes, there's a value to it, because every now and again, some people's minds do change. And when they do, that person that you're debating with, the one that you might be tempted to throw hostilities at right now, might well turn into an ally later on. People that I have gotten into hostile debates with have posted comments to me maybe a year or so later saying, it took me a while to figure it out, but you were right, and they're now advocating the same position. Bear that in mind, that that is an eventuality, and try to keep the vitriol down, because that very often may be the only thing holding them back from realizing that their position is unstable and not on solid ground.
Yeah. And I've talked about this a lot lately, both at the blog and Facebook postings, and I probably won't dig into it too much because we do want to get on to callers, but this idea of theism and atheism and how they relate with skepticism. There's been a lot of discussion about, atheism is not a, proper subset of skepticism and vice versa, or that skepticism is not the mother set for atheism. And they're right, it's not. And I've never said that somebody couldn't be both a skeptic and a theist. I was a skeptic long before I became an atheist. The difference, or the point that I would make, is that I wasn't skeptical about my theistic beliefs. At the time that I was a skeptic and a theist, it's because I wasn't applying skeptical ideals to my theistic beliefs. And my primary objection to this thing that I've dubbed the skeptic schism has been that there seems to be a contingent of the skeptic community who, in order to, they seem to want to go too far, in my opinion, to keep the peace or misportray some people's views by saying, yeah, there are theists who are skeptics, and we understand that not everybody necessarily agrees on that, but let's kind of cut them some slack and let's not address that. And I'm like, my primary position is, it's not like I'm going to run and get in their face and smack them around and what the hell are you thinking and why haven't you given up this nonsense yet? It's absurd. But likewise, nothing is beyond question. There are no sacred cows. There's nothing that we shouldn't be able to examine critically. This assertion that there's no testable claim, so there's nothing to look at, is nonsense. If we've learned anything from skepticism, it is that if a claim is untestable, you could not possibly produce sufficient evidence to justify believing it, and therefore, what skepticism has to say about untestable claims is they are not believable. And that's the only thing that I would ever actually say about how my skepticism led to atheism.
I get accused all the time of arbitrarily dismissing, a possibility.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that miracles are impossible by definition, and that God technically is not physically possible because the only way that we can indicate him is by something that defies all natural laws.
Right.
Technically, it's not a possibility, but I open my parameters even to that. Now, they tell me that I'm dismissing a possibility, but in fact, I don't have to dismiss what has never been indicated.
Right.
And I don't understand why people can't bring me a reason to open up this, show me something that indicates that, and I'll accept it.
You don't even
or
have
at least entertain the idea.
Yeah. You don't even have to get to the point where you ever mention that, by definition, miracles are impossible, because all we're really saying is you have something that you think is a miracle. You need to demonstrate it so that we can investigate it. Now, I'm of the opinion, the default position, that even if this phenomenon that you're going to identify, if it actually does occur, it's not in fact a miracle, even if it's something that we perhaps can't understand or necessarily explain. But the first step is to actually demonstrate that there's a there, and for some reason they can't get past that first block.
Yeah, and somebody told me that I had a presupposition that there was nothing but the material, and I said no. In fact, I actually believe that there is a great deal more to the universe than we have ever perceived. I will not speculate what it is. I have no idea. I suspect it's there, and I bet that when we find out what it is, it will be better, grander, more spectacular, and more interesting than anyone's notion of a God.
Yeah. And on that note, while we've got a lot more to talk about, there's actually somebody waiting online with a question that actually kind of mirrors a little bit of what we're talking about. We've got, is it Stefan in Brooklyn?
Yes.
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm doing okay.
Thanks for calling.
Yeah, I guess, I would have called at least a month ago. So, but I'm just calling on a different note, different from what I was called for last time. Mm-hmm. And it's not even from a scientific point of view. I just want to know what were the basic reasons for your acceptance of atheism?
Oh, all right. I have a slight problem with the terminology, but I'll skip that just to answer your question. And the answer is that religious claims failed to meet their burden of proof.
It's, if I may, it's not that we accept atheism, because you're talking about accepting a non-belief. How do you, or how about rephrase it? Our rejection of a belief means the same thing, I suppose. You're suggesting that we believe in something that was never indicated. Until it is indicated, I can't believe it. I mean, you can make up any number of things that might come to your imagination, but when you posit them as true, it is incumbent upon you to produce a reason why we should believe that that is true.
And by you, he's speaking, broadly. The terminology thing that I have a problem with is something that he just touched on, and I think one of the best explanations I've ever heard came from Dennis, and it's when you phrase it that way, like what made you accept atheism, or as some dishonest people have tried to argue, show me the proof for atheism. It's not, that portrays this as if atheism is some ideology that's selling something. As atheists, it's not that we're selling something else other than religion, it's that we're not buying what religion is selling. And just because I'm not buying this doesn't mean I'm selling something else. It simply means I'm not buying that.
It's funny, you're saying exactly the same thing you said the last time I were here. You mean the questions haven't gotten any better?
Yeah, we end up dealing with a lot of the same questions and issues over and over again, partly because the audience changed, and partly because for some reason there's a difficulty in grasping some of these topics, with a broader audience. So what else do you have, Stephen?
Saying, what are the burden of proofs that we haven't met? That's what I want to know.
Well, anything. I mean, you have a belief system that is dependent upon faith, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Faith is an assertion of absolute conviction that is assumed independent of evidence and which must be defended against all evidence to the contrary.
Right, but my reason for asking that is because in the last show, Matt said
my answer
atheism is not based on evolution.
My answer is that the belief in a God requires faith. Anything that requires faith in lieu of evidence is, in my philosophy, automatically rejected. It has to have evidence. There has to be something to indicate it.
Right, and the evidence that you're talking about science, right?
Well, yes.
Okay, but what I'm saying is last show, Matt had indicated very well that his atheism is not based on evolution.
Correct. Evolution is irrelevant to whether or not I'm an atheist, because evolution deals with one question, the origins of biological diversity, and theism addresses another question as to whether or not there is a God. And while I will admit that there are people who link the two, and that there may be different ways to link the two, my rejection of theism is because the theistic claims did not satisfy their burden of proof. And it has nothing to do with whether or not I accepted evolution. And by the way, the demonstration of this is that there are plenty of theists, Christians of all stripes, who do accept evolution because it's a fact that's demonstrated by evidence.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very incoherent for theists to accept evolution according to common descent from, as Darwin described it, because they call it an undirected process. If God is directing it, it doesn't make sense to say that it's undirected.
I agree.
If anything else that happens in your life, I mean, any trivial collection of instances that seem unrelated that might ultimately lead you to a certain conclusion, you might think that God was looking out for you and God arranged for these things to happen so that you would be in this place at this time, and it was so fortuitous. It had to have happened for a reason. Everything happens for a reason. So if that's the case, then evolution, although it seems completely undirected, could well have been orchestrated by whoever wrote the script for the existence of everything. I mean, he's got everything all laid out. He's written the prophecies. He's already told us how the movie ends. So how does this deviate from your perspective? Why can't a God who organizes every single thing organize every single thing?
Well, okay. Well, I'm still on my. I still haven't gotten off what are his reasons for evolution, because he's saying that that his atheism is not based on evolution, but he just keeps buzzing to say that it's just based on that we haven't met our burden of proof.
Correct.
Yes, so, and we need to make it.
Proof. You have to tell me, because proof indicates evidence, and evidence.
No. Proof doesn't indicate evidence. We need to work on some definitions here. First of all, evolution is population mechanics. Okay, that's it. It's reproductive populations and genetics. That's all you're talking about. That has nothing to do with whether or not we believe that all events are orchestrated by some higher intelligence, or that there are anthropomorphic entities with magic powers. They're completely different subjects. When we say that you haven't met the burden of proof, we are saying that you declare that your belief is based on faith, and that we must have faith to believe as you do. No, I don't have faith. I won't have faith. I consider it inherently dishonest. Do you have something more substantive? Do you have a reason why I should believe you.
And right, so yours, I know yours is based on a scientific point of view, but that's not what I'm dealing with.
Okay.
Can you answer that question with a yes or no?
Here's your thing. You're saying where haven't we met the burden of proof, and our answer is everywhere. So what is something that you believe that you are convinced you have met the burden of proof?
That's what you have to tell me. What is?
Wait.
No. I asked you a question. You believe,
If your
Stephen?
is not dependent upon science, what is it dependent upon?
Answer the question with a yes or a no.
Hang on. Let me ask that one more time.
I'm not honestly answered my question.
Ask that question one more time because I missed it.
I'm saying that if your atheism is not dependent upon evolution, which is to say, if you're not looking at it from a scientific point of view.
No, that's not what you asked. That's not what you asked, Stephen. Just a second ago, now you're asking if my atheism isn't dependent on evolution, what's it dependent on? And a minute ago, you asked if my atheism isn't dependent on science, what is it dependent on? My rejection of theistic claims is based on skepticism, logic, reasoning, the evaluation of evidence, and the theistic claims have not provided evidence sufficient to justify accepting them. Oh, that's it.
I'll go a step further. What you have provided has been entirely falsified. Every claim that religions have made, where there could be tested at all, they have been disproved. Where you claim that, let's say, religion is supposed to make you more moral, then if that is the case, then why is it that evangelicals have the higher divorce rate than non-religious people? Why do they have higher teen pregnancies? Why do they have more abortions? Why do they have higher rates of child abuse? Why is it that statistics show that sexual offenders more often than not tend to be religious, and that the more religious they are, the more heinous their crimes are? I mean, that's just one example. There is a negative correlation to all the claims that I have ever seen regarding religion. So it's not just that you didn't provide a reason to believe you, it's that you presented me with a whole bunch of reasons not to.
So you're looking at it from a moral standpoint then?
It was one of my many standpoints, yes.
Right. So I'll tell you, I'll give you the only plausible answer that I can give you as a Christian.
Okay.
And that is that the majority of the Christian world has not understood what we call the character of God.
So you're basically saying that the majority of Christians aren't really Christians, and so you don't have to take the blame, or they're not representative of true Christianity.
It gets better than that. He's saying that his God failed at communication on the most important message that he was supposed to impart to everyone.
Let me ask you this, Stephen. What do you believe about the Bible? Do you believe that the Bible is an accurate representation of what God thinks?
Absolutely.
Okay, so you think slavery is moral?
No, but God did not, as you say, endorse that.
But God did endorse
that. Yes, he absolutely did. Have you not read your Bible? Exodus chapter 21?
What you have done is read your
Exodus 31.
Right. What you have done is read your Bible, but the Bible says that you have to study it. There's a difference.
No, Stephen. I don't have to study it. When Exodus 21 specifically tells people who they can own, how much they can pay for them, and that these are their, and then in Deuteronomy it points out that these are their property which they can pass on to another person. There is no matter of interpretation there. The Bible endorses slavery. It explicitly endorses the owning of another human being as property to be passed on. That is explicit.
If you would read carefully,
No, Stephen.
The civil law and not the moral law of God.
No. Stephen, does the Bible not say what I just said it says?
Yes, it does, but I'm saying
yes, it does.
Out of context and from principle.
There is no context. There is no context at all in which owning another human being is morally correct. Are you saying that there is?
Let's be straight here. We have both the Old Testament and the New Testament reaffirm that slavery is okay, that it is permitted. Now, are you saying it's out of context? Show me where is the context. Where does the Bible say what we just said over here in Deuteronomy and in Exodus 21 and in Exodus 31 and over here in the New Testament too? Where does it say that we were just kidding and it's not okay to own slaves? Where does the Bible say that it is not okay?
Right. Earlier within the laws of Exodus and Leviticus, it was stated that there are two different laws. There is the moral law and there is the civil law. The moral law belongs to God. The civil law was established by Moses, which was written in the books next to the Ten Commandments of God.
But
so those civil laws were said that those were...
wait, who wrote the book? Who wrote the moral law?
The moral law was written by God himself, according to in Exodus 20. But
According to who?
According to Exodus 20.
Okay, and who wrote Exodus 20?
Exodus 20 is written by Moses.
By Moses. Moses being the same guy who promoted the molestation of preteen children in Exodus 31?
He promoted...
The guy who insisted that his followers kill women and children and keep the preteen virgins as slaves for themselves? Are we talking about the same guy?
Do you realize that the same God realized that this is what Israel was doing?
Can you answer that question with a yes or a no?
Stephen, what you don't seem to get is I don't give a rat's ass what Israel was doing or what Moses sanctioned. I asked you about the Bible that you think is the Word of God, that clearly states that it's okay to own another human being as property. Now, where in the Bible does it say, thou shalt not own another human being?
Right, let me show you that and slavery was in no way endorsed by God. You remember?
You're a liar. Yeah, well, I agree. I agree that it wasn't endorsed by God because there wasn't a God. If you're not going to answer the question, we're done.
Okay, but it definitely was endorsed by the Bible again and again and again. We've given you chapter and verse.
And you've agreed that it's there. And all you can do is say, well, that's what Israel did. Or let me assure you that I don't want your assurance. What I want you to do is be honest about what you believe.
Yeah, and the next time you want to ask this question, my question back to you. Can you give me a reason to believe what you do? And just answer that question with a yes or a no. And if you don't have a reason, we don't have a conversation. When you have a reason, be prepared to give it, and then I'll be prepared to consider it.
Yeah, when you start making excuses for atrocities, you have removed yourself from any valid discussion on morals. When you say, yes, the Bible says you can own slaves, but, well, now you're contradicting yourself, because before, the first question I asked you is whether or not you thought the Bible accurately represented the mind of God, the will of God. You've got this conflicted mess of contradictions, and you've found a way to rationalize them. You've gone and looked at that and said, boy, that really sounds bad, but that's what Israel was doing. That's not what God wanted.
But I want to...
Well, let me ask this, even though you're not on the line. You can think about this, and that is, you believe that there's an all-powerful, all-knowing, loving God who has an important message for humanity, and he is so completely inept that his best attempts at communicating to people managed to convey the exact opposite message of what you think he meant. Now, are you like the one who got it right, and all these people who authored the holy book that got you started managed to get it wrong? Is your God such a bumbling buffoon that he simply cannot say something as simple as thou shalt not own another human being, or please don't rape and kill the people in villages around you? And he managed to communicate so poorly that it got written down as thou shalt be able to own another human being as property, and oh, by the way, go over there and kill everybody and kill everything except for the young virgins? It's asinine. You cannot reconcile this. And it is incredibly infuriating to ask questions for which we already know the answer, to have you admit honestly that, yes, it says this, and then go on to make excuses for it just a second or two after saying you believe that the book represents what God wants. Well, I agree with you.
No.
God didn't say that.
Okay, God is all-knowing, okay, and he knows the future of all events. Yet he wrote a book that can only be interpreted as if it endorses slavery and heinous violence against women, against children, against your neighbors. How could your God be that omnipotent and devise a book where we can't distinguish between the law of Israel and God's law? I mean, they're interwoven, where we have metaphor and fact, and nobody can distinguish the two. We don't know what we're supposed to take literally, what we're supposed to take figuratively. Was it actually a tree? I mean, come on. We can't distinguish this. It doesn't make any sense. And it doesn't matter how it's translated, and it doesn't matter what version. But if it was written by an omnipotent being, there would be one version. And there would only be one way to interpret it, because it would be written well.
Actually, it wouldn't be written at all. What's wrong with your God just actually coming down and talking to people? Why can't he just say, hey, you know that stuff that's in the book? Some of it's not quite right, and I'm here to actually correct it.
Yeah, Shem and Habab wrote that, and they were drunk at that time. But let me get it straight.
Yeah. What you've done is when you say, oh, no, if you need to go read and study the Bible, some of us have actually done that, and it's one of the reasons that we're atheists. It's a primary reason. Some of us actually read it and studied it in detail. What you've done is not read and studied the Bible. You've read a passage, and then you've gone out and found apologists who have given you excuses in order to rationalize it. The fact of the matter is, the book says X, and I don't care how you read it or what you read into it, you can't make it say not X. And every time you attempt to do so, you represent that you are dishonest, you are not interested in actual dialogue, you're here to preach. This is my show, and you don't get to preach on my show.
And by the way, we've already given him too much time.
Yeah, way too much. We got Mike in Oklahoma City. How are you?
Hey, that's a tough act to follow, but I'll try. My question is I wanted to clarify something. Did he say that, was it evangelicals have more abortions, or was it theists have more abortions? I wasn't sure.
The national statistics that I've got hosted on a couple of my videos show that I just did screenshots of news reports where evangelicals have a higher divorce rate in the United States.
No, the part where you're talking about abortion.
Abortions too.
They have higher per capita.
Right. They have more abortions than non-religious people in the United States. Yes.
Okay, cool. Well, not cool, but all right. My question is basically, if the Christian worldview is true, and when Christians die, they immediately get to go straight to heaven, which is a perfect place to go with no suffering or anything. And if the atheist worldview is true, that when you die, you cease to exist, you would expect to see Christians living a life on earth that's kind of reckless, because who cares? If you die, boom, you get to go straight to heaven. But atheists, you'd expect to see them living a very careful, don't want to die because I still got 30, 40 more years. I don't want to end it right now. But in actuality, you see the opposite. What would how would you, if someone thought, isn't that interesting, how would you address that? This is obviously not an argument for anything, just an interesting observation.
Well, I don't know that I see the opposite. I mean, I'm sure that there are exceptions. I mean, it is kind of strange that that those who realize that they have this one life value it as they do. I mean, we tend to value most that which is rare, and when we have this one life, and this is all we get. And some of us were in the unfortunate situation where we realized that that's all we had, and we weren't going to be reincarnated, and we weren't going to go to heaven, and none of that, and all of that was untrue. We realized that rather late in life, speaking for myself.
Me too.
And so I realized that I've wasted all this time, and now everything that I have left is all that there is, and I want to make the best of that. And the only immortality that I will ever have is how well I'm going to be remembered, and that's going to be temporary. But it's the investment that I make in other people, in promoting other people's lives, that's rewarding for me. I've heard many Christians tell me that if there was no God, that they would run out and kill and rape and maim and cause vandalism everywhere. Why? Would that bring you joy? I mean, it's not possible to do that. We are a societal animal. We grew up in nurturing communities. There are deviants, of course, but most of us, by and large, want to be part of community. We want to be respected. We want to be loved. It's natural. It's part of being a social animal.
Yeah, and I think most of the Christians who present that argument are, in fact, being dishonest and exaggerating to try and make a point which is flawed about morals. The other thing is that, I agree with you on some level with what you're saying, and we've talked about it before in that if people really believed what they say they believed, seriously, then perhaps the greatest act of love one could express is like one of the many mothers who have killed their children in order to send them directly on to heaven so that they wouldn't have to risk potentially becoming polluted by a sinful world and going to hell. And if Christian theology is correct, then that may be the most loving act one could ever do, which would be to damn oneself to hell in order to guarantee that one's children get to live forever in heaven. The thing is that I think that, along with the example you gave, tend to kind of be one-dimensional. They're only looking at one aspect of this. And while it would be true, if that's all we ever looked at, the real picture is a lot more complex. There's a lot more intricacy, and that's what Aaron was talking about. It's not just about how many years of life do I potentially have left, and is there an afterlife? It's about the fact that even most of the people who self-identify as Christian or theist, I don't see many of them having that interfere greatly with their day-to-day lives. They get up, they go to work, and yes, I know there are some who pray first thing in the morning and pray all day long and thank God for everything. But by and large, you know, if I walk into a strip club, I don't think it's peopled with atheists. If I am, and by the way, I also don't think there's anything wrong with it. If I am out and I drive by a prison, I don't immediately think that the prison is entirely populated with atheists. It's absurd. I think that the population is, for the most part, going to be similarly represented inside those walls as it is outside, although there's some evidence that atheists may be underrepresented in prisons. The evidence that we have contradicts, as you're pointing out, what you might expect for each individual aspect of belief. But I think when taken on a whole, the evidence bears out exactly what we should expect in a more broad view of individuals and beliefs and actions.
Yeah. But there's one other thing I need to mention too, is that while you would think that an eternity and an afterlife would devalue your current life, I mean, people who are still Christian and who believe that they have an eternal life and that this world is worthless, many of them do say that this world is worthless, but by and large, most of them are still into preserving their own lives, and they're still into doing charitable acts for other human beings that, you know, he said you would think that if you literally interpreted, you might be doing them a favor by killing them, but it's not the way that people act. So your statistics either reflect that regardless whether you're religious or not, these things still occur to you, that good and bad things still happen, that we have good and bad people on either side, or there are, as I mentioned before, there are the negative correlations where things that you would expect would only be occurring among non-believers actually occur more often with believers. So we don't have any statistic. It would be fairer to say that we don't have any statistic that supports a moral advantage with belief.
Well, and I think I'm getting confused by your answer. I didn't have anything to do with morals. I'm just saying I'm only talking about like people's level of risk averseness. I'm not making the moral argument that theists are more moral.
I just think
my question. Yeah, I'm just saying. Yeah, if it's true that when theists, or I guess let's just say Christians, I don't know about every theist religion, but when Christians die, they're immediately sent straight to they believe a place where, you know, it's like infinite happiness, it's perfect, no suffering or anything. So if that were true, you would expect them to live a life that was kind of careless, because who cares if they die, they get to go straight to heaven.
No, actually, I wouldn't.
You don't agree with that?
No, not completely. See, here's the thing: is you're partially misrepresenting Christianity in this oversimplified thing, but your whole argument, which is why we addressed it the way it did, goes down to a belief versus action thing, and it has nothing to do with whether or not their beliefs are true. What we're talking about is whether or not they strongly and truly believe what they claim to believe. For example,
yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
I'm not talking about it doesn't matter whether it's true or not. I'm saying if what they believe is true, then that's how you expect them to act.
No. If they truly believe what they claim to believe.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, now you tripped me up. Yeah, that's what I said the first time.
Sure.
Yeah.
If they truly believe what they claim to believe, but what I'm saying is that your representation is an inaccurate oversimplification of what they even claim to believe. I agree with you that they probably don't most likely really seriously believe or aren't perhaps 100% convinced of what they often profess. But I'm saying that by and large, what they profess to believe is in and of itself more robust than that single simple point. I would not necessarily expect people to be living more reckless lives if they believe that they're going on to an afterlife as presented in Christianity, because by and large what's also presented in Christianity is a lot more than just where you go afterwards. That what happens here actually matters. I mean, you know, if you read through, for example, I don't want to necessarily go down a rabbit hole of who's a true Christian, who's not, but by and large I think most Christians would believe that the words that are attributed to Jesus, perhaps the Sermon on the Mount, whatever, might represent the best advice from the God that they believe in on how to live their life. And there's very little in there about, if anything at all, about what happens after life. And so the people who are living as Christians by and large in most Orthodox settings aren't at all, you know, the afterlife thing isn't always a primary concern.
Okay, I understand. Okay, that makes sense for that side. Okay, so then what about then the atheist side, as far as like how you'd expect and then how you see them actually live?
Well, we kind of got cheated out of heaven, didn't we? We don't have one. So
No,
if we're going to enjoy,
as far as like,
there's two realities.
They believe 100% that when you die, that's it. You would expect to see them live very cautious.
Hold on a minute.
Maybe they are. I don't know that they're not.
Hold on a minute. We got two realities to face here. One, well, first I have to go back to definitions and just remind you that we don't believe anything 100%. Even disbelief isn't necessarily 100%. We're open to have our minds changed. Okay, that's part of the reason we became what we are. But from this perspective, we've got two realities. One, there's no heaven. So if we're going to enjoy existence at all, this is the only existence we've got.
Yeah.
Do you want to enjoy it? And the second thing to realize is, are you going to die? Yeah. Can you get out of it? No. So between now and then, I mean, does it matter how long that is, or does it matter how good that is? And most of the people, fortunately, that I know, it's how good that is. And that matters more.
I don't necessarily know that atheists are more or less cautious in their life. I don't know that there's evidence to even support the original contention, but I'm with Aaron in that it's not what I would expect, and it's not what I see by and large. What I see non-believers doing is trying to live a life that they enjoy and are proud of for however long it happens to last.
Yeah, it took me forever to find. The only way I was able to find two pieces, and there's a lot more to the puzzle than this. I was able to find for smoking and driving without a seatbelt, which I'm sure we can all agree are great ways to end your life early. It was atheists over, I'm not sure if it was just atheists versus Christian or atheists versus people who believe in some type of a God, but it was atheists were more likely to engage in those two activities.
I'm extremely skeptical at this point because you might as well be talking about people with mustaches versus people without mustaches. I think the situation is far more complex than that sort of simple analysis is actually going to find.
Do you disagree with the statistic or what it would imply?
I'm disagreeing with the relevance of the statistic.
Okay, so if we're talking about risk averseness, smoking and driving without a seatbelt are irrelevant?
I'm saying that they're not relevant to whether or not somebody's a theist or a non-theist.
Right.
No, relevant to if somebody's living a life, their level of risk averseness. How they view risk.
I don't even necessarily know that that's accurate either. But
I don't see the relevance either. Whether you believe that there's an afterlife or whether you're not, how does that govern whether or not you're smoking? I don't get it. Most of the people I know who smoke happen to be believers, for whatever that's worth.
No, what I'm saying is that somebody may well understand that driving without a seatbelt or smoking cigarettes is a significant risk, and yet their life is such that it's a relatively innocuous thing that they don't consider, and they could be very, very safe in other areas. You could have somebody who's overly safe, perhaps too cautious in a lot of different areas, but also happens to smoke. I mean, I think you're not looking at enough variables in that statistic to actually have anything meaningful.
Yeah, well, but I'm looking at two variables, and you're looking at none, though.
I'm looking at the two you just presented and saying that's not enough.
Yeah, and I think we're adding more to that.
Well, you're adding the possibility that maybe there's some other variables that would say the opposite, but you have no reason to believe that.
No, I didn't.
Well, actually, I'm saying that I think that there are others, and I have plenty of reason to believe it, if for no other reason than looking at my own life.
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, you can find me one guy. We're talking about statistics. Yeah, I mean, you can find one guy who's the exception, yeah.
I'm not talking about exceptions. I'm saying the statistics don't say what you think they say.
Okay, why don't you conduct a poll aimed at what you're trying to achieve? Create the statistic yourself. See if you can get with a college or something to find some way of producing a statistic that makes sense to you, that conveys the question fairly. Have other people review it to make sure that the demographic that you're inquiring of matches. Is he still there? Is he gone? Oh, good. We don't have to worry about it then.
I'm sorry that I didn't, buy your 2 data point statistic thing as a risk assessment for humanity with respect to theism. I need more. Luke in Birmingham, how are you?
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Right. I'm just gonna present to you why I choose to believe. Okay. Let me start by saying, firstly, the God that I serve doesn't actually require about him, or in order for him to be healed by him. See,
In order for him to what?
In order for him to be healed by him.
So you believe in a God that heals, but belief in the God isn't required for healing?
No, and healing from selfishness into selflessness, because we are all born selfish, as I'm sure we can all admit. We're all born selfish, egocentrism. We're all born egocentric, and the opposite is actually the design for life.
Okay,
and,
I just want to make sure I'm understanding you. You believe in a God that can change somebody from being selfish to selfless, but belief in that
Right.
God is not required for that transition.
not necessarily.
That's
No.
an interesting question for free
Okay.
will, then.
No. What he will present evidence. Oh yes, and the next thing I was going to say is this: the God that I actually believe in values human freedom more than anything, and is actually willing to die, give his own life, than use his own powers to violate your own freedoms.
Okay.
And that's key. Secondly, the second evidence I have is that.
Whoa.
Wait,
My religion,
Well, Luke,
you can't have a second evidence until you have a first one.
okay, yeah, sorry.
there wasn't any evidence. That was just a definition of what you believe.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
go ahead.
That's true. Okay, yeah. Okay, then moving on from that, my religion teaches that God is love, and this love is given a definition. It's not an emotion or a warm fuzzy feeling. It's actually a principle upon which life is based. It is the principle of giving, and it says his nature. This principle of giving can actually be seen in what he has made. And so, if he created this world and his nature is love, and he is giving, you can see this in all systems that promote life. And an example of this would be principle found in nature. Would be respiration. With every breath that you take, you give out carbon dioxide to the plants. Plants give back. Give out oxygen. Give out carbon dioxide to the plants. Plants give back oxygen. It's the principle of giving that sustains life. Furthermore, you can see this example.
Hang on, Luke. Before you get to the furthermore, I mean, you've said God is love and God is nature, and that's all poetic.
No.
That's all poetic stuff. You didn't say that?
I didn't say God. I didn't say God is nature. I
Okay.
said his nature can be seen.
You said that
in
your religion
his
teaches
his
that.
nature.
You said your
his nature.
religion teaches that God is
what
love.
nature?
No, God's nature. God's nature is love. And
God's
this
nature
love,
is love, and
You're
then
right.
which is some nice little poetic non-descriptions, and then you say that this is a principle, and then you say that the evidence for this principle is seen in nature through something like respiration. And what I'm going to say to that is that the process of respiration, this synergistic process that you're talking about, where we exhale carbon dioxide that the plants use, that they then provide us with oxygen, that is an entirely material, understood scientific principle that doesn't
Yeah.
require love
Okay.
or
Right.
anything beyond that.
I'd like to also to bring
Okay.
up this is an important thing to think about. If God's nature is love, and you are apparently, I would assume, one of God's favorite creations. You are a human
Right.
being. That means that you're an animal. That means that
Okay.
in order for you to exist, you must consume and digest living cells,
Right.
as all animals do. So God's nature, according to you, is
Okay.
evident when we see a cheetah outrunning a springbok and tearing it apart. Am I right?
That goes on to prove my point even more, because then my religion also teaches that our planet is infected by an antagonistic principle to his nature that brings death, and this is the principle of selfishness, which is the opposite of love. It's the principle of me first and seeking out me first, because greater love is when you give your life for something, and then this other antagonistic principle is whereby you sacrifice someone else's life for yours. Okay. And in nature, you can see this when you see animals killing each other to promote their own well-being. And
But I need to understand something here. Who created the animals?
God did.
Okay. God made them have to depend on consuming living cells. God built death into the survival system.
Yes, that's because we are infected with this.
God infected us, is what you're saying.
No, not. My religion doesn't teach that. It teaches. It
God
explains
created
how
the animal.
people
The animal is
Hang on.
dependent on death to survive.
He's saying not originally.
Okay.
Okay.
You're
in
saying
the
that there
Garden
was
of
a
Eden.
yeah,
In the
yeah.
Garden of Eden.
You're
in the Garden
saying
of Eden.
You're saying that there's a time when animals didn't have to eat other animals to live?
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Are
Do you
you-
have evidence for that?
Okay, well, I'm going to.
Yes or no
when you
question,
look at
please.
it-
Can
when
you
look
answer
at it
with a
in
yes or a no,
totality,
please? Can you say yes or no, please? Do you
I
have evidence for that?
Animals, there's a time when animals never had to eat each other.
I didn't hear. Was that a yes, you have evidence for that, or was that a no, you don't have evidence for that?
And by
Please
the
answer.
way, there is an audio problem with the phones.
How can I have evidence for it?
So
Then
the
why
answer
would
is
you-
no.
So the answer is no.
Okay.
No,
Now, why do you believe it if you don't have evidence for it?
because it makes sense in totality with the rest of the evidence that I see.
Wait, with the rest of the evidence.
Yeah.
So what evidence? You said you don't have
Okay,
evidence, now you say you do.
The law of love is this, that in order for a living system to live, it needs to give, and when giving stops, death comes.
Wait,
And you
so
see this-
so the
you see-
springbok gives of itself to the cheetah?
Can I just explain? Can I just have 3 minutes? 3 minutes to explain what I'm trying to say, and then
I'll
you
give
can
you
ask
90
questions.
seconds starting now.
Okay, thank you. The law of giving is this. You see in the oceans. Oceans give the water to the clouds, and the clouds rain back down to the waters. And this is a circle of giving, and it continues. If a body of water if a body of water separates himself from this circle, it stagnates and everything in it dies. Secondly, you see this in your blood flows in your body in constant. This is again an example of this circle of giving. If you cut yourself, you cut the circulation, death ensues, and you see flowers give the pollen to the bees, and the bees increase the population of the flowers, and so on. It's a principle of giving. If the flower should choose to stop, then death will come. If you choose not to breathe, you choose not to give, you tie a plastic bag around your head, you die. And so this is
45.
you can see this in everything, and you see the planets circulate around the sun. Electrons circulate around the nucleus. You have the Krebs cycle, you have the carbon cycle. So everything is designed to operate in a circle. To operate upon giving, right?
Are you done early?
And so when giving stops, death comes. And so this is a law because it's testable. You can see this you can see this in nature, and also it's also testable in the fact that in nature we see things that do not operate upon this law, and this is what we call sin, and this is what's killing people, and this is God's plan on healing people. So and then okay, I'm done with that evidence. I have another one, but I'm done with that.
Cool, 90 seconds exactly.
Okay. Your evidence is that we see natural systems exist, and so we assume that they were created by God for no apparent reason at all. We just make that assumption. We didn't have any evidence for it, but that's what we want to believe, so we make that assumption.
No,
We
there's
have.
a law. There's a law.
Hang on, you had your time.
You said you could test this,
Yeah.
and that you could demonstrate sin. Well, I would be impressed if you could even define sin, but let's see a test for sin. You're saying.
Okay.
You're saying that animals eat each other in defiance of this law because of
Yes.
sin, and that you can test for it. How do you do that?
No. Sin is actually defiance of this law. This is the definition of sin. It is lawlessness.
What did you say was testable?
The law of giving
Okay,
things life.
let's stop this right here, because something isn't a law just because you call it a law. And what you've done is engaged in one great big flippin' argument from analogy. You go around and you observe that there is some order in the universe, something neither of us would reject. And then you say, look, there's this here, and it's similar to this here. And there's this here, and it's similar to this here. And there seems to be kind of similarities in order in the universe. Therefore, there must be a law that everything is this way. And I'm going to extend that further and call it a law of love. And the things that violate the law are sin. You cannot simply.
Not only that.
You cannot simply run around making observations and create a great big argument for analogy, and then give it a new label that allows you to give it another new label of God.
And then
That's
you also
asinine.
use the example wherein the flower gives its pollen to the bee. I didn't see any tendrils offering the bee anything. What I see is a flower, and a bee goes in and takes it.
Yeah.
How do you demonstrate? How do you test that?
It is a design.
How do you know?
How do you test
How
that?
could you test that? to test that, then you take a flower and try and grow it in isolation from bees.
No, that's not a test
Okay,
for design.
so what you're testing there is the evolution of symbiotic systems. So, how do you test for your assumption of God and that your secondary assumption that God's nature is love, and your third assumption?
It's falsifiable in this way. If you can give me an
Wait,
example of
are you referring to the Bible? The Bible that had Adam, and you said you could eat of all these,
I don't know.
all of these fruits, and
Yeah.
you will have these fruits for meat. This was before the fall. Is that what you're talking about?
No. That God never asked them to eat any meat before in the wild.
The
when they
fruit
got
of the
Eden.
tree of life and the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. You can eat any of the plants in this garden. He didn't say that?
Did he say meat?
Yes, he did. These
me
will
the
be
Bible
for
verse,
you
please.
as meat. Do you think that only animals have living cells?
Give
Do
me the
you
Bible
not
verse that
have
says
to
they could eat meat.
consume living cells in order to survive? Did the Bible not say that Adam had to consume living cells before the fall?
I'm not sure it said living cells. It doesn't say living cells.
No, it doesn't say living cells. It says you can eat all these things. Animals
you can eat
have
every
to
fruit.
consume living cells. That's what it means. We can't eat rocks. There's the only thing we can eat, living cells. Death is what we depend on to exist, and that is what the Bible says was before the fall. Now, is that your reference for how animals live in sin before the fall?
I'm sorry, I don't know where you get the idea that they could eat living cells. Please tell me.
I'm sorry, you were quoting the Bible, so was I.
Where are you quoting from?
Genesis chapter 1 or 2. You want me to go through it real
Chapter
quick?
2.
No, I mean like where you said you could eat living cells before the fall. I don't see that anywhere.
Are you familiar with the story of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil and the fruit of the tree of life?
Yes, I am.
Okay. And one of the questions I always like to ask people is, what if Adam didn't eat of either tree? What would happen then?
You have to understand the purpose of the tree. The purpose of the tree...
I understand the purpose of the tree. I want to know what you think it is.
Okay, the purpose of the tree was for Adam to have a choice to either obey God and grow in trust or give him a chance to choose his own path in his own direction. This is the freedom that he
So they're metaphorical trees then. They
Now,
weren't
here we
real
go.
trees.
Are you ready? Are you ready?
Okay.
Genesis chapter 2, verse 16. This is before the fall. And the Lord God commanded the man, "You are free to eat from any tree in the garden, but you must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for when you eat of it, you will surely die." That's an instruction, according to your beliefs, that God instructed them to eat from any of the trees except this one, correct?
Okay, yeah.
Are not those
Yeah.
trees living cells that they had to consume? Do
Yeah.
you not kill the apple and the pear when you take it off the tree and eat it?
Potatoes.
But
Potatoes
see,
really
there's a
don't
difference-
survive
there's
being
a
eaten
difference
very well.
between fruits. There's a difference between fruits and animals. The fruits and vegetables were designed to be eaten. They don't feel pain. They don't
Okay,
feel
now
anything. So I
you're
don't
just
see the
now
problem.
you're done. You're done, Luke, because now you're just making excuses. You've been your fallacy, even within the own context of your beliefs, has been pointed out. That this
Which is-
sinful thing of eating existed prior to the fall. That's already been pointed out. I also pointed out that you're just making arguments from analogy. And now when you've had that fallacy pointed out, now you're making ad hoc excuses that, oh, well, fruits are different.
And it's worse than that because you've
I
also
don't okay.
made an
Explain.
admission that the trees are metaphorical, that they were a choice. Well, we know that. All the way through the Bible, there are other references to eat of the fruit of this tree. And in every other instance except Genesis, it is automatically understood that when they talk about the fruit of this, they're talking about the results of our choices. It is a metaphor in every other instance except Genesis, where they suddenly declare that the trees were made out of wood and that you could make pies out of the fruit. But you're saying now, that it was a choice of whether they could live a long and healthy life or whether they were going to succumb to evil. Thank you for pointing out that it was just a fable with a moral and a metaphor, and that they weren't trees. You couldn't cut them down and build canoes.
Okay, thank you. Everything you said is relevant to the law of love that I've explained, and I've said it's
I don't
falsifiable.
doubt that.
It's falsifiable in the fact that if you can give me an example of life that exists without giving, you falsified the law.
No, Luke.
And I can give that example.
Even if you could give that example, it doesn't falsify the law because first you have to actually establish and define this. You can't just call a foundational principle of the natural order a law of love. Hey, guess what? When I drop the, when I, stop.
Call it what you
Stop. When I drop this pin, it's going to fall. That's something we can test for and falsify it. But I don't get to call that process love and attribute it to a God. That's the part that you can't test for.
What you're talking about is an assumption. And it's a baseless assumption if it doesn't have evidence.
You admitted earlier that you didn't have evidence for it.
I admitted I didn't have evidence for the law of love.
Yeah, you didn't.
Okay, Webster's definition defines the law as I'm using it as a statement of an order or
You're
relation
done, Luke.
of a phenomenon.
Luke, congratulations. Luke, congratulations, you're done. And I'll tell you why, so that next time when you call in, you don't make this mistake. Dictionaries describe usage. And when we're talking about philosophical issues of epistemology, and when we're talking about scientific investigation and the nature of laws, you don't just have to pull up Webster's as if it's going to add some validity to your logical fallacies. You made arguments from analogy, you started changing around labels, and you have convinced yourself that this is all evidence. And what you're actually engaged in is a grand argument from ignorance. You look around at the world and you see order, and you simply can't think of any other way that this order could exist without making an appeal to a God. It's an argument from ignorance, and it's demonstrable. And I don't care if you pull up Webster's, Funkin' Wacknells, or Rand McNally and draw a map. It doesn't add to your argument. If you're not going to put out things that add to your argument, you're done.
You've also said that it was a law. A law is demonstrable without faith. You said it was falsifiable and then admitted that it clearly was not. It should be, you've failed the criteria that you yourself have laid out. And then the only evidence of any sort, the only indication that you ever had, the only thing that you said ever implied at this point to you at all was a misinterpretation of a passage in an old storybook that you then later admitted was a metaphor. I think you need to rethink your position.
I didn't admit it was a metaphor.
Yes, you did. And
well,
fortunately, these shows are recorded so that you can go back and play it and say, aha, that's where I did it.
I'll even let you off the hook and just say that in the confusing circumstances, you said something that you can later take back if you don't think it was a metaphor. It's neither here nor there. You present something that has, your argument has no teeth, no evidence, and when called on it, you first admit there's no evidence, then you try to present something, then you're going to dictionaries.
No, I said I have no evidence that life existed before where animals didn't have to kill each other. That's all I say. The law itself is separate to what I say then.
It's not a law just because you say it's a law. Something doesn't become true just because I say it's true. Look, I'm surrounded by naked cheerleaders. It doesn't work that way.
A law is a statement of fact that is verifiably accurate under all or under a given set of circumstances by all observers. You're definitely not talking about that.
By you and everyone. Everyone could have observed what I've said. Everything needs to give, otherwise they die.
If it is a law, it will be observable by everyone.
The things that you're observing and the examples you provided, I agree. They are consistent with what you're saying. And what I'm saying in response to that is, so what?
You believe that...
Hang on.
Okay then.
You have provided examples of something. That in and of itself is not sufficient to establish that there is a law with a designed purpose, which is your intent here. If all you're saying is that there is order in the universe, we already agreed with that. If all that you're saying is that in the circle of life there is life and death, we already agreed with that. What we're saying is you can't get from here to here. You can't get from the bee takes pollen from the flower in order to pollinate another flower and then say, this is because some intelligent being created a law that this is the way things work. You can't get from A to B.
I wasn't going to say that. I was going to go gradually and show you that there's another law additional to the law of love.
But the law of love doesn't exist, and you did say that earlier. Go back and watch this show again.
Okay.
You did.
we have two options. Either natural, either they came about naturally, or they came about by an intelligent designer. And if I can demonstrate...
Well, actually, we have only one option that's ever been indicated. We've seen that evolution happens. We know that it happens. We can measure it. We can watch it in real time, in real life, under controlled conditions. There's no question about that. Evolution happens. Your options are that if there is a God, the intelligent designer drives evolution. Or if there is not a God, that's okay, because evolution doesn't need it.
In fact,
You're adding a completely... Hold on now. You're adding a superfluous assumption, one which you admit is based on fables in lieu of evidence.
Okay, you are free to believe as you wish, and so am I.
Well, thank you.
And
I'm glad I got permission from Luke.
Yeah, and I was just presenting to you what makes me, what I observe and see, and then look at this and then think.
The sad thing, Luke, is that you didn't present me what makes you believe that.
You know what?
You have an assumed conclusion, but you never explained why you assume your conclusion.
Your whole argument, and I know you won't see it this way, but honestly, this is accurate, can be distilled to, I look around and see this, and I can't think of anything better to explain it than God. Well, guess what? That's not an argument.
And it certainly isn't a law.
Yeah. And on that, I guess you can try again another week. I got to go. We only got 25 minutes left in the show, and there's people still waiting on hold. As a reminder, we'll be going to Threadgills after the show's over. 301 West Riverside Drive. Any atheist or atheist-friendly person is welcome to come down and join the show. You don't have to be a member to do that. And we'll be down there having dinner, and you can join us as well. We've got Jeremy in St. Charles. How you doing?
Hi. I had two questions, if I could. My first was, I think that there's a lot of bias in the American media in regards to favoring Christianity. And did you guys see this ABC News story?
Yep.
Okay, so you already know what I'm talking about?
I already wrote about it.
Okay, well, it fails to mention that the robbery didn't stop because the woman was talking about faith.
Correct.
It stopped because he thought he was going to have to pay for the money he stole. Well, not him, but the woman would.
Correct. It's exactly what I wrote on my Facebook yesterday.
Yeah, and it spends like 5 minutes talking about how the woman talked to him about like Jesus and her faith, which is true, but it spends 5 minutes talking about that, and then it spends 5 seconds mentioning the fact that he went off and robbed another store.
Oh, I hadn't heard that part yet.
Yeah, he went off and robbed another store, and that's when they caught him. So it even...
Yeah,
so
the headline...
like, even bring up that, and it mentions like the other thing for like 5 minutes.
The headline was "Woman Stops Robbery with Faith," and it should have been "Compassionate Woman Stops a Robbery with a Lie."
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we have another similar story from about a month or so ago. I think it was about a month or so ago. Could have been a little bit longer, but we have Jack Sparrow. I forget the name of the actor right now. I don't know why I'm drawing a blank. But the guy who played Jack Sparrow is mugged in an alley, and then he's recognized.
Johnny Depp.
Got Johnny Depp. And when the mugger realized who he was, no, I'm not going to rob you. I'm not going to steal from Captain Jack, and left. So there you go. The power of pirate movies.
I mean, and how stupid is that? Because if anybody could afford to be mugged, it'd be Johnny Depp. I mean, the guy's loaded. All right, what was your other thing?
Oh, my question was, it was about like news coverage. There's been a lot of news coverage over a Muslim mosque that is being built 2 blocks away from where the World Trade Centers fell. I don't know if you've heard about this or not.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, well, the city of New York is trying to stop them from building it, and it seems to me that the media is kind of promoting it. And even though I think anyone can easily understand why this is a sensitive issue, well, the Constitution says that the government will make laws that hold a neutral standpoint on religion, and I mean, I don't understand how that can happen. I'm kind of in favor of like the mosque being built, and you might disagree with that, and that's fine. I was just kind of wondering what your guys' opinions are on that.
My take's really simple. If they allow any religious organizations to build buildings there, then they have to allow all of them. And if
that's what I was.
And if they're going to prohibit one, then they got to prohibit all of them.
And if you're what you're talking about the American news media being biased, and I think actually the word you were looking for in this particular instance is sensationalist. Yes, absolutely, it's a travesty. Our journalism has completely gone down the toilet. It's a worldwide shame. And the people in other countries, I mean, I talk to international people all the time who reflect that if you want to know what's really going on in America, you watch news in another country.
Yeah,
they know more about our history than we do as well.
The news station that won the coverage for the best coverage on the American war was the BBC.
Yep.
Bingo.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Jeremy.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate it. Yeah, the sad thing is that, you know, if I'm honest, I'm as guilty of perpetuating the problem as anybody. Because the reason that story was titled, you know, Woman Stops Robbery with Faith is because that's what sells. It not only gets the faith heads to buy the paper, but it gets us riled up and talking about it.
Yeah.
Because, so they're just being, you know, that's how you make money. If they'd have written the headline that I suggested, Compassionate Woman Stops Robbery with a Lie, probably wouldn't have got much press at all. I mean, you have to manufacture a story. And it would be nice if there were more. There are plenty of journalists with integrity, and there are plenty that find stories that don't have to be manufactured. But the general public, including I'm no exception, dig on some sensationalism.
Yeah.
And
I've been interviewed on the TV news a number of times, and every time that the news has covered some event of my life, they've gotten the details wrong. Every time.
oh yeah.
I mean, journalism is at least inaccurate, but then when it goes to as you said, to sensationalizing, gets into the whole Fox News thing where they're just, you know, it becomes a show, and you can't rely anymore on what you're seeing because you're not getting an account of what's really going on. You're getting opinions of what's going on, and to a degree that's fine as long as you can get a counter opinion to weigh against that and make your own mind. Now, enough said about that.
All right, real quick, we've got in San Antonio, is it Samer?
Hello?
Yeah, can you give me your name again? I'm not sure this is right.
Samer?
Samer?
Yeah.
Okay. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Well, actually, I'm an ex-Muslim. I consider myself now as an agnostic, but leaning towards atheism. Anyway, I actually had a couple of debates with some theists, especially in the physics field. Well, they claim that God existence was not proved, but, I mean, supported by one of the most brilliant physicists in history, which is Sir Isaac Newton. So since Isaac Newton had written lots of books and articles about religion, well, that would pretty much support their claim. And I actually have no explanation. I know he was raised in a religious family, Newton, but he didn't even become an agnostic. He was a strong believer, theologian.
Yeah, Newton was batshit crazy about a few things, actually.
So you have an explanation about this? Why?
Into alchemy type stuff at a time, I mean, I actually had that wrong. In any case, your friends are wrong. The fact that Newton believed in God doesn't add any more credibility to the God claim than anybody else who's ever believed in God. It's an appeal to an authority, and a fallacious one, because Newton hasn't demonstrated any expertise on the God subject. And with regard to his belief in God, I think he was wrong.
Yeah. Well, don't you think that he looked at it from a scientific point of view?
No. He didn't look at God from a scientific point of view. But then, in his time, they didn't evaluate things in terms of natural versus supernatural. Okay, and they just assumed, as they'd been taught, that everything that happened, regardless what it was part of God's way. So whatever they found would be something that had to be something that God did. The motions of the universe, for example, when they started challenging the movements of the planets and geocentricity, for example, when they started realizing that the universe does not rotate around the Earth, and still many people still believe that it does, but when they started challenging in that, I mean, they weren't yet. The scientists at that time were not worshiping Scripture, even if they were worshiping God. There was a distinction. The Bible was written by men. The world was written by God. That means the Bible could be wrong, and God still exists. What you get with the modern creation movement is where they can't distinguish between the two, where doctrine and deity are one, and they cannot accept that God could exist if the Bible is wrong. The Bible, in a sense, has become God.
Right. Yeah.
In a sense, Newton did kind of what a previous caller had done, because in Principia Mathematica, I think it was, he writes that mathematics is the language with which God has created the universe. So Newton looked around at the world, begins with an assumption that there is in fact a God that is governing and controlling everything, and so everywhere he looks and sees order, he defines it and understands it scientifically, but ultimately attributes it back to this God, which is Newton's science was better than the previous caller, but the leap from this level to the God thing is just as unsubstantiated on behalf of both of them. So even if that individual that had called earlier had been a brilliant scientist, it wouldn't have lent any credibility at all, because you can't get from this is what we observe and what we can detect and measure scientifically to it's that way because of this God thing. And so on that subject, Newton was in error. And there's plenty of other people who have, there are brilliant thinkers who I admire who are in error.
One of the questions that could never have occurred to Newton would be to test whether or not there was a divine influence. I mean, you have to remember that the church ran everything. So if you did have an idea that you wanted to question religion, there were laws in effect in the land at that time that would prohibit you from expressing those ideas. They controlled everything. You could not publish any idea that argued against the church's position, whatever they said that it was at the time. So, but it wouldn't have occurred to him under most circumstances anyway. Everything that they see, everything in the natural order would have been designed by God. No one questioned that. No one in his circle of friends questioned that. It might never have crossed his mind that he should question that.
It is, by the way, an incredibly dishonest argument. This is raised a lot of times by apologists that'll say, well, and they'll misrepresent Einstein and others, but they'll rattle off a bunch of smart people and say, well, Newton and Einstein and so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so, they all believed in God. And the intent there is to make you go, well, I'm not nearly as clever as those guys, and if they believed in God, maybe I'm wrong. And that's an incredibly dishonest thing, to which I'll answer, okay, on the subject of God, I am smarter than Newton and Einstein and everybody. You're not going to make me feel like I'm less than because you've made a fallacious appeal to authority. I can't stand dishonest argument like that. Does that mean I think I'm better than or smarter than across the board? Absolutely not. But I think those guys got it wrong in that area. And until somebody demonstrates with evidence that I'm actually wrong on this, and there is some God. And by the way, if that were to happen, if somebody were to today provide scientific evidence that validates that in fact there is a God, I would change my mind based on the evidence, and I would still point out that all of those people who believed it before were unjustified in their belief, because the evidence for their belief did not exist back then. If they got it right, it's happenstance. It's a fluke.
I agree with you. Yeah.
Yeah. Congratulations on your being able to break out of the mold that you were born into as well. Yes, it requires the free thinking that it takes to reject what everyone in your family and everyone in your culture is totally convinced about. If you're able to break free of that, regardless of how immersed in it you are, then you have to understand that when they use an argument like that, where they're supposed to imply, well, all these people are smarter than you, so you must not understand, that argument's not going to work for you for the same reason that all these other arguments didn't work for you. It's because you can think for yourself and you can figure out your own answer.
Yeah.
Right.
So congratulations on that.
All right. Thank you very much, guys.
Thanks, Sammer. That'd be interesting, I mean, if we listed a whole bunch of dumb atheists, would that... Because I could probably list a few.
I could come up with a couple too.
Yeah, or we could, whenever somebody says, well, Einstein and so did the village idiot. The village idiot in Newton's town believed in God too. So exactly, let's set those up and see, is that evidence for anything? Probably not.
You know what, I'm thinking you need a longer show.
Yeah, because we're down to actually under 10 minutes now. And we appreciate the people who waited patiently through some of the other calls, but We'll try and, actually, I think my line 2 information's wrong, so you might want to check that, because that was from before. But we'll get Nick in Reading.
Hey, guys. How you doing?
Hey, good.
All right.
I just wanted to bring up something that I've never seen you mention in the show, and I've noticed you've had a call or two in the last couple weeks about intelligent design. One of the things I wanted to mention was, by the way, I am a theist, but I'm also an evolutionary biologist. I don't argue with science at all. I guess in your terminology, I'm an agnostic theist in that I do believe, but I would never be arrogant enough to say I know, and I admit I could be wrong. But anyway.
We can hang then.
Yeah, well, that's outstanding. We'll never have contest.
Oh, and yeah. By the way, Aaron, love the videos. But what I wanted to say was that when it comes to the theory of evolution, the big contribution that Darwin made to science wasn't the idea of common descent. That had been around since Anaximander in ancient Greece. His contribution was the mechanism, natural selection, how it happened. And what occurred to me was for intelligent design to be considered in any way valid, they would first have to propose and second demonstrate a mechanism of their own whereby life could be designed. And I don't think they're ever going to do that because that would probably destroy their entire theology.
Yes, exactly, because they depend on it being a miracle. It's the God of the gaps argument. It can only be explicable by defying the laws of physics, as we mentioned earlier in the show, the definition between, or the distinction between the natural and the supernatural. So since they've hung their hat on the supernatural and then declared it science, they painted themselves into a corner, and that this is the best they're ever going to achieve. The beautiful thing about this is that it's going to have to die down. They lost their court case 5 years ago. Their whole agenda collapsed at that point.
I know, I read the transcripts.
Yeah, but not just that event, but a number of other things that went on in the same year. I mean, that's when Kent Hovind went to jail, among other things, and that's when Ted Haggard got hung up. But there were a whole lot of...
do I remember that one?
There were a lot of elements.
He's back and straighter than he was the last time he came back as straight.
According to who?
According to him. By the way, one of the things about the wedge document that we've talked about before and that I'm sure you guys will be familiar with is that I think Barbara Forrest actually pointed this out, that the strategy was actually twofold, the wedge strategy. And one was to kind of undermine evolution.
And the next was to get it out of the schools.
And the second phase was to actually do what you're saying they should do, to demonstrate an ID mechanism.
Really?
That would be an alternative.
Okay, because
and there's a direct
going back
admission.
to a little point that Aaron said earlier, where he said it defied the laws of physics. I'm going to say that it doesn't, because it could conceivably be possible for us to design life one day.
But that doesn't imply a supernatural designer. Right. That's what they've hung their hat on.
Well, yeah. They hung their hat in the supernatural. I mean, they always tiptoed around saying it was supernatural. It was, an unnamed designer.
Well, they also said at various points that it could only be a supernatural designer.
But anyway, if you dig around a little bit in the original wedge strategy stuff, and I think there's actually an admission that's, I think, posted on Talk Origins or whatever.
I've read the whole wedge strategy.
Where he's basically saying, we haven't been able to do the lab work. I found that movement just very, very disgusting, because I am a huge proponent of separation of church and state. The government has no right to tell anyone what to believe. And neither do these religious groups have any right to push their crap on anyone else. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks, Nick.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Have a good.
My skeptical radar's going off. I'm not convinced you're a theist. You'll have to provide evidence to convince. I'm just giving Nick a hard time. All right. Probably one of the last calls of the day. We got Dave here in Austin.
Oh, hey. I just wanted to touch briefly on this thought that people have about how there is only one God.
Okay.
I just want to say they're reading it backwards. It's not that there's only one God. It's that God is one. The Bible defines God as being everything from A to Z.
But one is the loneliest number.
Right, but it's everything.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. God is everything. We already have a word for that, though. It's everything.
I think they call it cosmos.
Yeah, I mean, we have several words for it. This is one of the things where before when the caller talked about God is love, I know we got God is everything. We talked about this before. Okay, you can play little word games like that, but you first need to kind of recognize that you're adding baggage to something and not justifying the baggage that you've added.
Yeah.
The God label carries with it some baggage, and if it doesn't, why are you using it? I mean, if God is love and absolutely nothing more, then why not just say love? Why are you adding this God word to it? Clearly, you're trying to say something more than just God is love.
Yeah.
And yet, it's almost like you're trying to use that abomination of a word, spiritual or whatever. All right, we got Tick from L.A. Hello?
Or maybe not.
Hello?
Hello?
Hello. Hey, Aaron, how are you? This is Dick Shades.
Who?
Dick Shades.
Okay. This is the
How
guy
are
that
you?
predicted that there was going to be nuclear bombs. According to the Bible, there would be nuclear bombs used to seal the leak in the Gulf.
Right.
Okay.
It hasn't happened yet. So,
You're,
but anyway, I
you're
have a
calling
question
in
for
at
you,
the
Aaron.
very end of the show, so you got to make it quick.
Okay.
Right. Can you tell me why you cannot accept the Bible as the evidence of God? Because
Because
the
God
Bible-
is better than the book.
the book
If
is
there was a
fiction.
God, if there was a
Fiction
God,
is based on something.
if
that
there
has
was a
to be
God, the Bible.
existing already.
Okay.
So-
The answer to your question, we're running out of time. If God existed, the book that you're talking about would be entirely different if there was a book at all.
Well, that's your opinion.
Okay.
So you got to tell me.
Hang
let's
on.
say Harry Potter. Let's say a spaghetti monster. You got to know spaghetti and monster to come up with spaghetti monster. Now you have God here. How can you write anything?
Sir?
It's really simple. Man, super. Done.
Yeah. And
Hey, look, Aaron's got more hair than me, so I can then imagine a being that has infinite hair. Hey, look, he runs faster than me. I can imagine a being that runs infinitely fast. There's nothing, this anthropomorphizing of a deity is nothing more than I'm an agent who can act and do this, and I look around and I see other agents who can act and do other things, and some of them do them better. I wonder if there's somebody who can do them perfectly. You act like this nonsense of you have to have these concepts in your head before, so therefore that proves that there's a God. No,
There's also
because
the-
I have to have the concept of the unicorn in my head, and that doesn't prove that there's a unicorn.
there's also the requirement, again, of faith. If the book says you have to believe the book, or else we'll give you the greatest presents in the world if you believe it, and we'll threaten you with a threat worse than death if you don't believe it, and you have to have faith and believe us for no reason. I'm sorry, that doesn't cut it. And then when you come up with whatever else it's trying to extol, I mean, when we look through it, we find things that are wrong, things that don't match up, things that contradict each other. The book doesn't win. There's no evidence for God there. If there is a God, the God did not write the book.
Yeah.
And by the way, while I've got a few seconds left, if
You
I've
don't.
got it, I don't?
Go.
Okay.
Like five.
For those of you who are interested in this sort of thing, the League of Reason is on Blog Talk Radio or Blog Talk TV on Sundays just prior to this show every week.
Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We'll be back again next week, and you all be safe.